Episode number 17, Nancy Simpson. Have you paid the toll? Gather up the kids and the old folks, shut down the contraptions and dim the lights. Put away your pocket-sized magic lantern shows. Close your eyes and listen. It's time to strike off on the paths less traveled, down the trails and through the hills and hollers, along the riverbanks and into the brush. Hear the tales of things forgotten get told. Join me as we venture into the wild and woolly Ozarks. I'm your native guide and host, Champ Heron. Welcome back, gentle people. I'm going to adjust my chair. That's the creaking in the background. Thank you once again for finding your way to the fireside. We don't really need a fire tonight, though. It's pretty warm. But pull up a chair and rest yourself. Before we go any further, if you haven't yet subscribed, followed, joined, or made any other public declaration of support, please do so. It helps us grow and upgrade the podcast. We've got some exciting episodes coming, and especially this evening. Got someone very special. To all our friends and neighbors who tell me they love the podcast, suggest topics and guests, a big thank you. We appreciate you. You all are the best. Have a mystery to plumb, or maybe a wild and woolly piece of the Ozarks history you'd like to share? We welcome you to drop us a line at wildandwoollyozarks@gmail.com. Well, gentle people, the podcast is now in its second season. Want to thank you all for staying with us. We've got a lot of great things to come. Going to have, I've got some interesting things planned. I've got some outlaws planned. I have got some various things that coming down the pike, some interviews. I think we're going to talk about moonshining. Imagine that in the Ozarks. But for this evening, really want to just cut to the chase because we've got a great guest with us tonight. Someone who I got on the phone, and an hour later I was like, wow, that would have been a great recording to have had because it was such a fun conversation. She doesn't hold back. She'll push back, and that's the mark of a good conversationalist, nothing else. I'm talking about Nancy Simpson. Now, when I got her, I said, what do you want to do for your biography? She said, well, I've won a few awards, and I've done this, and I've done that, and I was raised on a hog farm near Clinton, and that's about the size of it. Nancy's being a little modest here. She worked at KTTS for 26 years. That's where many of you are going to remember her. She was on the air. Then she was promoted to assistant news director, where she earned 12, count them 12, Edward R. Murrow Awards for her news coverage, including hard news, feature, investigative reporting, best digital news story, and 3 writing awards. Nancy has also won 13 Missouri Broadcaster Association awards for coverage that includes investigative reporting, news series, and 6 Best Radio Newscast Awards in the state of Missouri. Currently, her project, which she's going to unpack for us, includes a podcast where she takes apart stories and crimes and other mysteries called The Toll. Nancy, welcome to the Wild and Woolly Ozarks. It's great to have you.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I am just delighted to be here tonight. So thank you.
So if you don't mind, maybe a lot of people remember you from the news days, or they maybe had lost track of where you were, what you were doing. Unpack the toll. What is the toll?
Well, the toll started when I was at KTTS, and a lot of people are like, "You're so familiar to me." They don't know what I look like, but boy, when I open my mouth, they're like, "Oh yeah, you were in my car. You were in my garage when I was having a garage sale." So I get that all the time. But it started with a passion for news, right? I was in the newsroom for 20 years, and the newscasts kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter, down to like just a few sentences. And that is not how I'm built. I want to dig in, I want to tell a really good story. And so the guy across the hallway in Power 96.5 was like, I love true crime. And I was like, I love true crime too. And he said, you tell the story, I'll do the production and music, and we'll just do a podcast. And I said, what's the deal? And we looped a couple of other people in, and we really just started with nothing. We started with
Right.
me loving to tell stories, and I was on the hunt for a good one. And I had a couple. Stephanie Mahaney comes to mind. House Fire comes to mind. I'd worked on those, and they just, something happened. They fell through. And I ended up on Shirley Jane Rose, which is season 1, The Path Back Home. And I was driving to Kansas City with her cousin. We were going to a ball game. And Christy Foster and I have been dear friends for, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And she was telling me a story about the day her cousin was abducted and murdered in Springfield in 1975. And that would be Shirley Jane Rose. And I didn't ask any more questions. I was really just taken back by this story from this person that I've known for so long. And so when I started looking around for stories, I went back to that one. And in my life, I have so many synchronicities, and I always listen to those synchronicities. And one of them was that Shirley Jane was taken on my son's birthday, October 17th. And then when I started digging in, it turns out Shirley and I share the same birthday, November 21st. And it's those little things that keep me going. And I thought, you know what? This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to do this story. Now, with Shirley Jane, it was very old and very cold, and it still is. So I had to integrate some of my own stories. So somebody would bring up 3 missing women, and I would have a story about the 3 missing women. Somebody would bring up Jackie Johns, and I would insert my story with Jackie Johns. And so I had to integrate some of my own stories in there just to bulk it up, because it was so lean with such little information. But I do think that there's a charm about that, especially for people who live around here. And it helps people get to know the Ozarks and fall in love with Shirley, because people kept bringing other things up. Haley Owens, right? I do a whole series episode on Haley, because Shirley Jane and Haley were taken just within blocks of each other. And so when I would ask people about Shirley, they would think, oh, I know, and then Haley, right? So I dig into my experience with Haley. But yeah, there's all kinds of stories in season 1.
Refresh my memory on the on Shirley, if you don't mind. Just the
Sure.
kind of the for the listener at least, and myself, to kind of give a brief of the case, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it was October 17th, 1975. She was walking a few blocks away. She'd been playing with my friend Christy, her cousin, that night. Christy was younger than she was. She was 6 at the time. And Shirley was going to run home to that house on Scenic that we now known as the DeLong house, the plumbing house, that white house on the hill. That's where she was walking to from West Street. So it was a few blocks. She was going to grab a few things and then come back to Grandma's house. And, you know, an hour later, she didn't show up. And Grandma called the mom and was like, hey, is Shirley there? And she's like, no. And Joyce said she hasn't shown up. And Grandma said, well, she should have been there and back by now. And so the hunt was on for Shirley Jane. Her body was found 2 months later. It was December 13th, up by McDaniel Lake in a shallow grave. And they have arrested a couple of people. They have never found the killer. No one's ever been convicted for that crime.
Yeah, that's one of those I'd heard about. I'd never really looked into it.
Mm-hmm.
So where were we going from there?
I may also say that there's a blue car element, and that plays a role in season 2 as I transition into season 2. And it's it's one of those things. Did people see what they really thought they saw? Can witnesses be, not trusted? But
Sure.
there's so many discrepancies. Did she make it home? I posed the question, did she actually make it home? Did something happen at home? So there's just a lot of different elements to that story. And there was a man that was under public suspicion almost his entire life. I take you through his journey and stories that I've gathered from other people. And also, because I know you like a good ghost story, champ, there's also a ghost story in the middle of season 1. I did not want to do a ghost story. I pushed back on that with all of my might. I did not want to come off as hokey or disrespectful to the families involved.
Hey, that's my market. I've got the hokey market.
But Shirley Jane kept pushing me in that direction. I believe she kept bringing me people to substantiate parts of that story. And it turned out to be, I think, a really interesting piece to season 1. And there's a video that you should go check out. So
Okay.
video to the ghost story element.
Yeah, you have quite a bit of stuff out there. I started with the longer ones because that's what I'll do when I'm working on the farm. So your own story is kind of you're as a young person, you were brought up and you had became somewhat acquainted with a murderer, and you talk about that. That had to have influenced your something about being a journalist that had to have influenced you to want to get to the truth and to seek justice for other people. You unpack it. It's an extremely it's deep and it's a touching episode. It's a great piece. So unpack that a little bit for us, if you would.
You're talking about the episode called "My Mom Married a Murderer."
Yeah, I wasn't going to just jump to the punchline. I was going to let you do that. I
Because my mom married a murderer. Yes, and I was actually an adult when that happened. Now my sisters were much younger, and I ended up taking custody of one, and the other one was emancipated by the state. But yeah, she left our dad, and that was a terrible abusive relationship. And we were happy for her. She was very happy for the first time, that we knew her. That being my mom, and then comes the secret. And the secret is he spent 14 years in prison for killing his first wife in El Dorado Springs in the 70s. She was 16. She was pregnant. He shot her through the throat and left her in the ditch for dead. And I did not dig into that story. Back then, we didn't have, Google where you could just look things up. It would have taken a lot of effort and time. And I was young, I was in my 20s, and I was dealing with 2 kids, and those were my sisters, trying to figure out what to do with them. And I just never really dug into the story. And then after we had started this podcast, my sister sent me a little blurb she found on the internet, and she was like, I think we need to look into this. I think, a lot of this is a lie that we'd been told. And so I take you through that journey of finding out the truth behind the story of Leanne's murder, and talking to his sister and unpacking her trauma through this. And then she puts me in a car and takes me out to the grave. And so we go through that scene in the rain where we're standing in front of the tombstone, wondering exactly how old was she because of all the discrepancies, and probably like just I don't know if it was changed because of embarrassment or sadness. I don't know why, but dates weren't matching up, and we take you through that journey.
Yeah, he also wasn't really a clever murderer.
They never are, Jim.
Well, yeah, it's the ones that you don't ever know what happened to them, or the clever, or done by the clever ones, I guess. But yeah, he'd went and bought a shotgun and shells, and he'd always said that he took the gun out of Grandpa's gun out and just
Grandpa's out of the truck, and it was loaded. It was never, ever loaded. And that's the story that we had. It's a story I had heard one time, and it was almost "Don't dare ask me again." And you just do other things and you walk away.
Sure.
So yeah, I was quite astounded at what I found. And I was astounded at how much I found because there was quite an appeals process. And within that, there's so much paperwork that you find and, the court system and all of the stories that are unpacked through that. So we were just, my sister and I were just like, wow, listen to this. Look what I found. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And you were able to really quickly find out that his story that he'd always maintained was just
Yeah,
story.
a story.
And just truly a story. So here's what I want to ask you. How did that affect you as a reporter and as a journalist?
I think I always had the bug anyway. I think that it was just an element in the mix. I always lived under suspicion of curiosity and things. I grew up in an abuse and neglect, and I don't shy away from talking about that, but it makes you very attuned to everything that's going on around you. It makes you very sensitive to emotions and feelings, and trying to read people very quickly. So I have one of those talents. But I think I just always had that natural curiosity. It certainly didn't hurt digging into that, but I didn't do that until the Toll podcast, but because I just didn't know the truth and I was dealing with so much at the time. But
Yeah.
certainly it gives me street cred, champ.
Yeah. Well,
But I didn't know I was going into news. I didn't know I was going to go into news. I just wanted to be on the radio. Since I was 10 years old, I knew I wanted to be on the radio. Radio was my escape on the farm. But when the job came open at KTTS, it was news.
that's kind of unusual because radio people tend to move around. And you didn't. You were like George Costanza. They couldn't figure a way to get you out of there. So when you went, what was that like when you went in there? What were you doing to start with? You were doing morning news
from the very beginning, because Kurt Brown was the general manager, and he had a reputation of being a hard man sometimes. But I went in there in 1997, and he hired me to write commercials. And I was like, oh, I'm a good writer. And I know that about myself. And I think it's very important that you know your strengths. And I am a good writer. And I went home and I was like, I got the job. I got my foot in the door in the number one station. How cool is that? And I loaded my butt up the next day, and I went back and I went before him and I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, I can't take this job. I'll be stuck in the basement, and I'm not supposed to be in the basement. I'm supposed to be on the radio. And he had a few choice words for me and sent me on my way. And then about 4 months later, I got hired in news. So I don't know if he thought I was going to go out there and get some criminals or what, but he hired me in news.
What was your first big case where you like, wait, I'm just a kid and I'm out here covering this? What was the first big one?
Boy, do I have that answer quick, because I was working overnights, and these two girls, they were college age, they had switched their driver's license, right? So they had each other's driver's license. One died and one was hurt beyond recognition. And they didn't know. They didn't know. And so when I did the reports, that information that I got from officers, because they didn't know either, I named the wrong girl. And I thought, oh, this is it. I mean, this is how you get fired. And it was a terrible situation. And my heart was broken for the families, and it was broken for what had happened. And, I knew it wasn't my fault, but I felt responsible. And it was just, whew. And then the second thing that happened right after that, I was on Missouri State campus. It was SMS back then. And this girl had opened her door and stepped out, and a car hit her and killed her. And it was pouring rain. And the officer said, go in that apartment and wait in that area, and I'll come get you and I'll talk to you. And I said, okay. So I went in the vestibule of this apartment complex, and I had my microphone against my chest, and then I had my notepad. against that. And so you couldn't see the microphone. And this girl comes in and she's crying and crying. And that was my best friend. Do you know what happened to her? Is she okay? And she was just crying. And I froze and I wasn't going to show my microphone, I wasn't going to do anything. And
Sure.
I just gave a big hug and I was just like, I'm so sorry. And like, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. And I was standing there really contemplating, can I move forward? Because this is how it's going to be. I'm going to be at the worst place, meeting people at the worst times of their life. And it turns out I'm really good at that. And sometimes you don't get the story. Sometimes you walk away with a feeling of, I gave him a hug. I told him I was sorry. And man, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And that's what you offer. And you do something else. How's that?
Wow, that's blown away. So eventually you went to the news director,
Assist-
assistant news director.
yes.
Yeah, well, Don's from Marshfield, so he'll forgive
Yes.
me.
Yes, he
But
is.
but so you were assistant news director. What were you working on there?
I was anchoring afternoon drive for the most part. That was my gig. And then going out and breaking news and a lot of storm chasing, a lot of chasing
Sure.
tornadoes for a living. Yeah, that's how most people remember me. Even if they didn't listen to that station, they tuned in for storm coverage.
So that would have been when like the tornado went through Webster County in like 2006 and then Joplin in 2000 and what was that? 12?
11.
11. 11.
Yeah.
Been a
So we
while
had
ago
the
now.
03, the 06, and the 11. Yeah. Yeah, I was in all of those.
Yeah.
And I only almost got sucked up twice, which is pretty good for a 20-year run.
Yeah. 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 You weren't out there chasing them like in Twister.
Well, no, yeah, no. It was neat to have that transition of technology because when I first started, we didn't have that at all, right? But when I ended, you could see it on your phone. I was tracking it. I was safe. That was not how it was in the beginning. It was
Sure.
two-way radios and holding on for dear life.
Sure. Sure. Now, another another thing I really wanted to ask you is you basically retired after 26 years service. You've earned all those awards, which is quite an accomplishment. And then it, you had already started the podcast, right?
Hmm. Yeah, well into it. Yeah, I started it. We launched it in 19. I started researching into 2017.
Okay. And so what do you have? We're going to go into a couple more things that are in there. I want you to kind of unpack, but I guess let's just go ahead and do that now, and we'll circle back around. So I went down, I went down the Gypsy rabbit hole, um, and
Girl.
I, man, I tell you what, I did not go and look at any length to the other sources that you had said, the other podcast. What was it?
Into the Weeds podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I caught a couple clips of that. It's like that's enough. I'm done.
Yeah, two 5-second clips were plenty, weren't they?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. It's
Yeah.
too much. And so the good people of Southwest Missouri have long labored under the illusion that this gar- cartoon
Woman.
girl child, I mean, girl woman, I mean, that she was put in this situation by her mother, and it was a Munchausen by proxy. It was grift. It was um they liked the attention. They could use it to get free stuff. Maybe the girl was sick. Maybe she wasn't. And what I liked about then we never heard any more about it. That was just what was sort of left there. And I always thought that there had to be surely some more nuance to it than that. But I never really thought about it. And then I came across, I was cutting wood. I can hear you over chainsaw. That's always a positive. So for any podcast I listen to, so I was cutting wood and I had to stop and I'm like, what? Stopped and drank coffee and listened to the biggest part of that because I couldn't believe it. And so why don't you kind of and by the way, your episode on this, I encourage you, even after we kind of spill the beans on some of this, go listen to this episode because it is so good. Even if you think that what you're going to hear that is not true, go listen to the whole thing and then see if you still feel that way. So Nancy, unpack how you got involved in this and how you finally decided to go the way you went with this episode.
It's so hard because she was such an impactful person, Gypsy and Dee Dee. If you ever met them, if you ever saw them, you never forgot them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people poured a lot of love and a lot of money into this mom and daughter duo, and they feel duped. And to go back and try to explain to them that everything was a lie, and they go, yeah, I know. No, everything else was a lie. It's so hard to get them to switch. I got involved because I I just got into this group of women who decided that they were gonna dig into this. So it's called Into the Weeds podcast, and that's the group that I have gotten in with. And Amber heads that up. Amber's cousin is in Chillicothe prison, and that's where Gypsy spent her time in prison. And Amber it does ministry. And so they would all pray for Gypsy. And then things didn't start adding up. And Amber thought, oh, I'm going to start digging into this a little bit. And this lady from the UK had already gotten the transcripts for the emails, the prison emails and stuff. And wow, it was eye-opening just from that. And so I first physically met Amber at CrimeCon and in Nashville. And
What's CrimeCon?
CrimeCon. CrimeCon is a convention. It's going to be in Vegas in May, and I'm going. I've been to the last 3. And it is everything crime. They bring people from every facet. And John Walsh was there last time. John Ramsey, John Bonet's dad is always there. Anything from like Netflix, true crime, like those people will be on stage talking. And you think, oh my gosh, that just sounds like a feeding frenzy. And it's not. It is a lot of people who are trying to make the world a better place after something very tragic happened to them. They are pushing narratives, they are pushing legislation, they are pushing the message. And it is astounding how many parents take a booth out and are just begging a podcaster or a producer to cover their child missing. And so it is just a lot of education. There's Creator Row, so there's a lot of podcasters there. There's a lot of networking going on. You have DNA consultants that give seminars. You have true crime stuff on Oxygen Network giving seminars. So it's 3 days of, if you're a true crime person, it's 3 days of really cool learning, a lot of learning. Mm-hmm. And so I met her at CrimeCon. She had rented a booth and she had all of these emails printed off. You could look at every single one of them. She had a QR code. She was on a mission to get the word out that Gypsy was not as she appeared. Well, Nicholas Godejean was the autistic man that Gypsy lured to Springfield to kill her mom. It was a 2.5-year mission of hers to get him here. She worked on him for 2.5 years. And his appeals were exhausted, which meant that you could do a Freedom of Information Act and get the information, the videos, the emails, all of the stuff.
Were those state or federal appeals?
This is all state.
All states. So
Yep, there's
Wisconsin
no
must
federal
have some law where you can go
there's
access everything.
yeah, there's no federal charges on her yet.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, and so we got
Yet.
hundreds of, I don't know, maybe it's not hundreds, but it feels like hundreds of videos that she was making for Nick. And her sole purpose was to get him here to do a job, right? But it was so much more than that. It was all the text messages, it was all the emails, it was all of the back end computer searches. And it told such a much different story. And what everybody's been able to piece together through all of this evidence is that Gypsy really was sick on her own accord. She had a microdeletion and microcephaly, and her existence as a child was her being sick. And Dee Dee, it appears, was just trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with her daughter and was taking her and trying to get her better. She had failure to thrive. She needed a feeding tube. She was sick. Her chromosomal disorder was not discovered by the medical community. I think it was 2008, 2009. And she was not diagnosed until 2011. In 2011, you see things start to really change. You see her sending Nick a video saying, look at me. You're not looking at my dress. I'm standing up. She'd been lying to Nicholas, saying that she couldn't walk. Well, she reveals in this video that she can walk. And then she reveals to her mother that she can walk. So she'd been lying to her mom this whole time, saying that she couldn't walk. She
And
had a
and hold on a minute. We know that specifically how that she reveals it to her mother.
yeah, through messages.
Okay.
Yeah, and in a video. Um,
Okay.
and come to find out, at 9 years old, she had some kind of seizure and she did lose feeling in her legs, but she didn't tell anybody that that feeling came back because
Hmm.
she didn't want her mom to not love her anymore and she liked the attention. So the doctors, they knew that something was wrong, her feeding tube, like failure to thrive, all that stuff. They couldn't figure out why she couldn't walk. Well, she could. And you see glimpses of, you know, things happening throughout her life where the pieces should have fallen together a little more, but I don't know what was happening behind closed doors between her and her mom, and I'm sure it was atrocious. I'm not saying Dee Dee was perfect, but I am saying that Gypsy was lying even to her mother about how bad things were. And there's that whole teeth thing. My mom gave me all that medicine in my teeth. No, she admits on a podcast and in an email and messages that she would suck on a bottle, and she had poor oral hygiene. That was on her medical records. She signed for her own medical stuff because she was an adult.
Mhm.
It's all a lie. And at the end of the day, when you get to the very end of what we're finding out, Dee Dee's searches on her computer become very different. And it is what's the leading medicine that children steal, what to do when your child steals your medicine, because Gypsy was stealing her mom's meds again. Um, Shelters. It appears she was going to kick Gypsy out. She was Googling rare breed, which is a shelter. And when I talked to the neighbor about 2 months prior to the murder, she was in that house. And I said, what did it look like? And she's like, oh, fine, tidy. And I showed her pictures of the crime scene with all those bags of clothes and all that junk pulled out. And she said, oh, no, that's unrecognizable. So you see them packing or pulling stuff out or whatever. And you also see messages between her and Nick. My life's about to change. I don't know what I'm going to do. I need you to get here. I need you to do this job. And things really start ramping up at that point.
Mhm.
It's mind boggling. Mind boggling.
I wonder, do we know when she was able to walk? Like, when's the first message? Had she been for some time before she told Dee Dee that
Yeah.
I wonder how long that time period was.
From like 9 to 17. Like, yeah,
She
long
could
time.
walk all along from 9
Oh,
to 17.
hmm.
So the good people of the Ozarks says the mother made her do it. The mother made her do it. And,
Hmm.
that's not an unreasonable assumption at the surface level. What's your big thing where you were like, but, well, yeah, what was your big thing where you were like, yeah, this is not what it appears?
It was in 2011. You see the shifts start to change. Okay, so she tells her mom she can walk. In the house, they put film over the windows, and they do that because Dee Dee didn't know what to do. Gypsy's going to walk. She's in the house, right? This is what we surmise.
Mhm.
And then there's a police report. There's a police report. There's a medical record where, and in her book, Gypsy's book is full of little nuggets. She talks about picking up a pellet gun and shooting her mom 10 times, and she thought it was a real gun, and then holding a dagger over her mom. Um, so it comes to light that maybe Dee Dee was afraid of Gypsy and things were happening. We have the medical record where they pointed out all the pellet marks on her body. And then there's a Facebook post saying, oh my gosh, we were attacked at Walmart. This guy, got us. And
How far before the murder are we
that
talking, Nancy?
that would have been 2011, and the murder happened in 2015. So for a good 4 years, Dee Dee was living with the knowledge that things were not as they appear. And you don't know if she's not saying something to protect Gypsy at this point. That's how it appears. Saving face on her own because she doesn't know what to do with this information. Um,
Well,
I
even
don't
the
know.
most honest person, after getting basically the goodwill of the community, would just probably want to disappear rather than say, hey, look here. She's mobile, she's bipedal, and there you go.
But you say, what's the difference between what she grifting and hustling? Because
Yeah.
Gypsy really was sick, and she knew Gypsy was really sick.
Mhm.
This whole Munchausen by proxy, and my mom made me do it, is in no email. It's in no text message. It's in no correspondence.
Mhm.
In fact, we can see Facebook messages between her and her dad where Rod's like, she was a good mama. I loved her. She was good to you. This all came about as a pure defense at the very end. Mike Stanfield, her public defender, was like, okay, and he says that if it were to go to trial, she would have gone to prison for life. And
Mhm.
so he had to come up with something to save her. And then he quit his job and became her manager. So I don't know what
Whoa,
that
whoa,
tells
whoa,
you.
whoa, whoa. Stop, 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 stop.
I'm sorry, what?
He's a public defender. He
Uh-huh.
defends her,
Uh-huh.
and then he becomes her manager.
Yes. He's
Managing.
not her manager anymore because I don't know why, but yeah.
Use your imagination, folks.
I'm just saying that all of this that I'm talking about is Into the Weeds podcast. Everything is public. She has made everything accessible for anyone who wants to go look at it for themselves. All of the videos, all of the documents, all of the police records, everything is it's ready for you. It's on YouTube under Into the Weeds podcast.
It's something. I glanced through it. I didn't sit through all of it because that's just, yeah.
But
Yours
but
was about enough, but
But my message to the good people of this area, if you gave to them, if you gave money, if you helped them, if you raised money, she really was sick. And Dee Dee's attention, I believe her attention to her daughter is why Gypsy can drive and go to the grocery store and have a baby today. I believe it's because her mother got her all the medical attention that she needed to thrive.
hmm, wow.
Yeah, it's nothing you can sum up in an
It,
elevator pitch for
no,
sure.
it really isn't. It really isn't. And it made that awful movie about it. And
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I wish we could just cut those things out and paste them somewhere else. Don't have to think about it. One of the things, you've got a series on there called Poison Control.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you unpack for us what poison control is and kind of what they can expect when they go through? Because it's first of all, you have to start at the beginning, folks. So if you're going through your Spotify scroll, that's where I listen. You've got to go down, start at the very, very beginning. And I didn't do that. I just clicked. So, and if
Please start at one.
yeah. So why don't you unpack for us what poison control is, other than a killer band name?
Poison control.
It's got to be a
Uh,
cover band for Poison, though. So, or a theme. What do you call it? Tribute band?
a tribute band. There you go. Poison Control took me 5 years to complete. It was a beast of a story. It is a beast of a story. And the woman at the center of the story is still alive, living her best life out west. I am asking authorities to take another look. She was investigated by the FBI for 4 years for poison, and she was never charged. Bodies were exhumed, and a lot of things were investigated, but poison is tricky. And I learned a lot of lessons along the way. But this is a story that Dateline, 48 Hours, Good Morning America, crime reporter Michelle McNamara all wanted in the past. And for different reasons, one of them being that she was never charged, it never came to light on their end, although I have a lot of correspondence between Dateline and 48 Hours, and they worked years on it. Michelle McNamara, she was a big push behind the Golden State Killer, Joseph D'Angelo. She's I'll Be Gone in the Dark book in the HBO special there. She worked on it for several years too. But the daughter, her name is Jeanette, and she carries a secret, and you'll learn about that as you listen to Poison Control. But every once in a while, she would Google missing Missouri children, and she did after season 1, The Path Back Home, about Shirley Jane Rose was released, and she thought, I've never heard this one. I've never seen this story. And she listened. And the more she listened, the more she felt a kindred spirit with me, coming from similar backgrounds. She loved my storytelling. And all of those stories that I put in about the Ozarks and my own experience, that's what sold her on me. And she reached out and she said, hey, all these news agencies in the past have wanted this story, and I want to talk to you about it. And so when I talked to her for the first time on the phone, the first 10 minutes were about her dad and the secret. And after 10 minutes, she said, oh, by the way, my mom was investigated by the FBI for 4 years for poison. And I was like, whoa, I got 2 investigations. What on earth? And that was part of the 5 years of investigating. But yeah, it's a story that is rooted in secrets and blindness, right? Functional blindness. And it's a lot of unpacking and trying to take a woman who is seemingly very complicated and breaking down her words and her thoughts. And, the daughter's main goal was just to keep her mom talking. And she did that through emails. And I had to sift through thousands of emails during this. And it was very challenging. But yeah, at the end of the day, I feel that there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that authorities needed. I've filled in the gaps between cities, states, families, decades, into a cohesive story that really shows a lot of patterns. And I would love for somebody to take another look.
So, folks, it's on the Toll podcast. You can get it where you get your podcasts. Be sure to follow through that. I'm going to have to just take and just commit to it and just go through it all at once. Um, so what's on the future? What's on the horizon for your podcast? What are you going to be working on next? Anything you can share with us?
Well, I have a lot of bonus episodes that I'm following up on with season two. There was so many characters and so many stories offshoots that I couldn't even get to. I did an initial dive, and it's more of a chronological order, and it ended up being 16 episodes. So there is a first version of Poison Control that exists. It's 16 episodes. And then it was like, okay, this is too much. And it's not in story form as it needs to be. So I had to rewrite the entire thing, which is part of the 5-year process. And this is what you have now is the 12. But there's so many different, like I said, characters. I'm actually getting ready to go up to Lake of the Ozarks over the weekend and meet Dr. Brayfield, who is actually Buddy Brayfield, a founding member of the Ozark Mountain Daredevils. And he has agreed to talk to me. He was this family's neighbor when he was living at Spring Lake up near Kirksville, Missouri. And he said yes to an interview. So I'm very excited to see what he has to say.
All right. Right. Well, one thing I've asked all of our guests to do is to kind of unpack your creative process or your writing process or your researching process, because there's someone out there who wants to do exactly what you're doing, or maybe some older stuff like I'm doing. Most of my stuff's a century old. So, why don't you unpack how Nancy run? What does that look like?
I run with a lot of feeling. If it feels different, it's probably a really good story. If it's hard to ask, it's a really good story.
Mhm.
Always get the name of the baby. Always get those little details. It being a baby girl or a baby boy is different than it being a name. It being little Joshua.
Mhm.
Um, Always listen. Shut up and listen. You're in your own way, right? Those dramatic pauses that I do are by design in my storytelling. um, I was called the dramatic pause queen, and I wear that crown. And it serves me well while I do interviews, because that pause gives them time to say what they need to say.
Mhm.
um, Researching a story, though, Champ, I just go with my gut. There are people out there who have never been asked to tell their story, and they want to tell their story. And I've never had somebody say, gosh, I regret ever talking to you. I've never had that. It's always, thank you. Now my story has a place to live. And I don't have to retell it. I can just point them in that direction. And everybody I've ever done a story with has said that. Thank you for giving my feelings a voice and my story a place to live. And I think that's so very important. If you are a good storyteller, if that is what you're brought into this world to be. And I always uh, reach out with empathy. I am not a hard journalist. I, I
Right.
got to get this story. Never how you should approach a story. It is, I am so sorry this happened to you. And I want to honor your feelings in this while telling the truth. Um, but digging and researching is a very patient person's game. You never know where that information is going to come from or where you're going to find it. And it takes a really long time. These people who think they can come in and just whip out a story and it's done, and well, congratulations. But doing a deep dive and doing it with feeling and meaning is hard, and it's long, and it takes a really long time. And
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm one of those people who can stick it out, because boy, it's rough some days.
Yeah, if it's 100 years old, I have a pet project about this fellow that was lynched in Marshfield, and Everybody calls it the lynching of Dick Cullen. They completely forget the little victim, the little 4-year-old boy. But it's, you know, it, so much stuff disappears so quickly
Yes, it does.
from memory,
Hmm.
from documentation, you know. Um, Newspapers don't last forever until they got digitized. They didn't, you know.
Right.
Different things like that, and you're just, if something happened a week ago, you're going to still be grasping at threads, I feel. Maybe not, but uh well, that is, that's interesting. Now, are you going to be doing any other projects? You got anything else coming down the pike, or anything you're going to be working on? What
Yeah, I do.
and you're going to be releasing some more of the stories from the poison control series.
Yeah. So I'm seeking out more people in that series for bonus episodes. There's just so much to tell, and there's so many interesting characters. So I'm still trying to seek them out 5 years after I started.
Sure.
But yeah, I have another couple of stories that I'm working on. One was a house fire in Springfield. I started that years ago, and for a couple of reasons, I backed out and didn't finish it. But I think now is a time to pick it back up. And also, during this, we discovered some stuff with my sister, and it kind of ties into poison control. And lo and behold, we have a 4-year-old in Nebraska who has the wrong name on his gravestone out of all of that. And we're going to go figure out why. So, yeah, a lot of family secrets. And sometimes you just gotta ask the right person, and you get some answers.
Well, it sounds like you're good at getting them, and we look forward to seeing the upcoming episodes. And be sure to we want to sure to just extend that invitation to have you back here if there's anything you want to unpack. Um, and how can they find you and follow you, Nancy?
I'm just about everywhere. So, the Toll podcast. I have done supplemental videos because, again, there's so much to season two. And I always love to talk about Shirley Jane Rose whenever I can, because this year is 50 years, and that is a really long time for no answers for family. So, um, anytime I can push her message, I like to do that too. Gloria Barnes, her body was found on the truck stop lot on Chestnut Expressway several years ago. Renee Williams, Eagles Lodge. Chris Revac was a suspected serial killer. I dived down that rabbit hole with Douglas County Sheriff Chris DeGase. And my mom married a murderer. We unpacked that too. So I have a lot of stories
Yeah.
out there if you want to join me.
Well, everything I've heard has been, excuse me, everything I've heard has been really, really well done, and I appreciate you doing what you do, because it's great. Um, for our listeners, I do have an update. The Webster County Citizen came out yesterday, and they have gone ahead and sentenced Bobby Banks, who was the killer of Kellyanne Workman. Now, a good podcaster would have looked up and seen what they sentenced him to, because they didn't have it as of press time. But it's probably enough that he will never ever see the light of day. And so that ends our little saga. We got in after Kelly's killers were caught. We interviewed Dan Weimer over at the Citizen,
Yeah, I
and
heard
that's
it.
the
Great. That's a
that's
great.
the last of them. Oh, thank you. That that one just flowed. And so this is the last of them. I guess Wiley Belt was not prosecuted. He predicted that, but the Banks brothers should bother no one else at the service of the state. And good. Good.
Lots of art. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, folks, I want to thank you for joining Nancy and I here tonight as we unpack what she's doing with mysteries and true crime, and a wonderful podcast called The Toll. Do you have a mystery that we need to plumb? Maybe a wild and woolly piece of Ozarks history you'd like to share? Maybe you're a local historian writing that first book about a shootout. Hey, we want to talk. Be sure to follow us over on Facebook. The other socials have kind of fallen by the wayside because we haven't had the ability to film anything, but we will be getting them back up and going here shortly. Also, I have some upcoming episodes. So there's a couple things I'm going to want to do with the podcast. One is, before we go into this whole laundry list of hoodlums that I've got planned to talk to you about, we need to understand the Constitution of post-Civil War Missouri, the Drake Constitution, because this plays into several of our stories, and I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to bring an expert on to tell us all about that. And then we also, still kind of trying to talk somebody into doing it, we're going to have a guy unpack first-degree murder, the standard for first-degree murder prior to 1940. So a lot of our cases are hanging cases, and we have a different understanding of the justice system. And so I want to provide that to you before we go into these. So it's kind of going to be a primer. We have a couple of other things coming up. How about travel to the bodacious Ozarks? That'll be one. You dim the lights and close your eyes and listen. And I've got another one coming up on some mysteries. I can't exactly say what they are. I've got several, but I'm going to give you three. I'll give you three. And it's bound to be one of them. It's just whoever I can get corralled first. We have a MUFON episode coming up. We have a Sasquatch episode coming up. And there's another one. What was it? It was a Mysterious Places one coming up. I'm just going to say Mysterious Places because she covers.
Just Mysterious Places.
Yeah. So
I love it.
We got that, and then we're going to have some outlaw stories that, yes. I have a special guest who's going to come on and unpack the Emma Malloy murder and the lynching of George Graham in Springfield.
Oh, wow.
So that's a thing that was a nationwide headline day after day. And it's largely been forgotten except for a few historians like Larry Wood and some others. So we've got that we're going to go into. And a bunch of other stuff. I'm looking across the table here. I'm at the kitchen table, and I've just got legal pads lined up with what we're going to do.
That's a good storyteller right there.
So we've got, I'm going to talk to you about a character named Colonel Paul. I've got another character who we almost hung at the Webster County Jail, but he beat the rope. I've got all kinds of fun things to share. So we appreciate you following us, and we appreciate you liking and subscribing and sharing with your friends. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and share it from there. And let us know if you have something you want to unpack. You can drop us a line at wildinwoollyozarks@gmail.com. Well, folks, we appreciate you. This is season 2. It's going to be a little different. We are adding technology. And so I'm going to leave you with the final line that we've always shared. And I'm going to tell you something about this. Todd Wilkinson and I were leaving Mitch Jane's house in Eminence, and we drank a whole bunch of beer, and we were trying to negotiate his steps, and he was kind of watching us kind of funny. And Mitch Jane was a writer, and those who know who Mitch Jane was. I don't need to go into it. And I said, Mitch, good night. And he said, boys, y'all take care, and if you would, please be good to the tourists. That's our closing line. Good night, you all.